If you have a Bible with you, turn to the 38th Psalm, Psalm 38. Actually started talking about this last week, but since we don't have exactly the same audience every week, let me just reset the stage for you, if I may. In the book of Psalms, there are 6 of the Psalms that are considered by Christians to be Psalms of penitence. In other words, I'm sorry that I did this. I need to repent of something that I did. Sometimes one of those Psalms will actually give us the occasion so we know that what it's about. For example, in the 51st Psalm, David talks about his sin. He committed adultery with Bathsheba, and he talks about that in that Psalm. This Psalm, Psalm 38, is a penitent Psalm, but we don't know what he did. He doesn't name the sin. Before I read it for you in its entirety, and we'll do that in just a moment, it's not that long a Psalm. Before I read it to you in entirety, understand that he talks about some things in here that have to do with physical dimensions. And so some Bible students read this and go, well, not only does he feel guilty about something that he did wrong, but it appears that he also has some kind of physical illness at the same time. I'll go ahead and submit the idea to you so you can decide for yourself as we read through it, that I think actually it's a combination of the two, that it's not some physical illness that he has other than what's caused by his own guilt. Now, he'll talk about the fact that God has struck him with this illness. And in a sense, in any illness, we could finally put back to God, because if God chose for us not to be ill, then God could obviously make us well. But if a person, for example, drinks heavily, becomes an alcoholic, destroys his liver, and then with cirrhosis of the liver finally dies, in the process of his death, he couldn't look at God, I think, and say, this is your fault. You did this to me. I have this great pain. When we would look at it and go, well, in a sense, since God made us the way he made us, you might ultimately get back to him, but it's because of what this person did that caused this problem. If he were not an alcoholic, he would not have the cirrhosis of the liver, so why blame God for that? Now just pay attention to the psalm as we read Psalm 38, beginning in verse 1. It's a psalm of David. It's a petition. O Lord, do not rebuke me in your anger, or discipline me in your wrath. For your arrows have pierced me, and your hand has come upon me. Because of your wrath, there is no health in my body. My bones have no soundness because of my sin. My guilt has overwhelmed me like a burden too heavy to bear. My wounds fester and are loathsome because of my sinful folly. I'm bowed down and brought very low. All day long I go about mourning. My back is filled with searing pain. There's no health in my body. I am feeble and utterly crushed. I groan in anguish of heart. All my longings lie open before you, O Lord. My sighing is not hidden from you. My heart pounds. My strength fails me. Even the light has gone from my eyes. My friends and companions avoid me because of my wounds. My neighbors stay far away. Those who seek my life set their traps. Those who would harm me talk of my ruin. All day long they plot deception. I'm like a deaf man who cannot hear, like a mute who cannot open his mouth. I have become like a man who does not hear, whose mouth can offer no reply. I wait for you, O Lord. You will answer, O Lord my God. For I said, do not let them gloat or exalt themselves over me when my foot slips. For I'm about to fall, and my pain is ever with me. I confess my iniquity. I am troubled by my sin. Many are those who are my vigorous enemies. Those who hate me without reason are numerous. Those who repay my good with evil slander me when I pursue what is good. O Lord, do not forsake me. Be not far from me, O my God. Come quickly to help me, O Lord, my Savior. Now, if you paid attention to that, he definitely talked about some of the physical attributes there. His heart pounding within him, the light gone from his eyes, the bones feeling as if they're being crushed, the searing pain in his back. And those are definitely physical attributes, no doubt about it. Which, as you can see, is why some Bible scholars would read this, or Bible students would read this and say, okay, he has some kind of illness at the same time that he's feeling guilty about that, and the two are tied together. And that could be true. My opinion is that the commentators and scholars and students who say that probably have never had to deal with massive guilt on their own. If there's anybody in this room other than me who has gone through things where you have done really bad things, and not only did you violate what you believed and what you valued, but other people knew about what you had done wrong. And in your great pain, when you face your own guilt, then some of us understand, as we read a psalm like this, that what he's describing is what guilt will actually do to your body. That not only does it hurt your psyche, your soul, not only will it break your own heart, but it will actually have manifestations in your body. As a matter of fact, when I read that, I look at that and say, wow, this looks to me like a man who is extremely depressed. The light has gone from his eyes. And in his depression, he has all kinds of pain, all kinds of misery because he's hurting so badly over what he's done. I have been that guilty. I have felt that kind of burden. I have actually had the physical manifestations within myself of that. And maybe that prejudices my view of that passage. Because I have experienced sensations and feelings like that. Maybe I'm the one who reads it with the tinted glasses saying, oh, that's what he's talking about, because that's what I experienced. You can decide for yourself. Does the man really have an illness and guilt, or is guilt causing his illness? You've heard what I believe. You can decide what you think the text is saying. You would understand, of course, that this is only applicable to somebody who actually feels guilt. In our culture, there are a lot of people who don't feel guilty at all about what they do. There are people who don't seem to have any remorse whatsoever. They can do it for lots of reasons. We have developed a culture, and I don't mean just in America. I think it's actually pretty well worldwide, that we have developed a culture, even in my lifetime, which has only been, 25, 26 years now. In my lifetime, I have seen a big change where that when I was a boy, we were taught things about integrity and right and wrong and consequences, and that if you do this, it's not the right thing to do, and that you should feel guilty about it and you should rectify it. But over time, it appears that more and more people became so narcissistic, became so self-focused, that after a while, anything they wished to do was okay if they wished to do it. Like, how dare you sit on judgment of me? If I want to do that, it is my right, it is my privilege. I believe in human rights. When human rights are talking about the rights of humanity. No one is talking about the right of one person over the rights of all others. For example, you could say, I have a right to own a vehicle. Sure you do. But you don't have the right to take somebody else's vehicle as your own. There are rules that have to be followed. And if any person sets himself or herself up as being the final authority, I can do whatever I wish to do because it makes me happy, I can tell you what that leads to. It leads to the state we're in today, in America and in many places in the world, where people just blow things off and do whatever they wish to do. They don't care how it affects their family. Like, I don't care how it affects my parents, because right now, at this moment, it makes me happy. I don't care how it affects my siblings, because right now, at this moment, it makes me happy. I don't care how it affects my children, because right now, at this moment, it makes me happy. Therefore, it must be right because I'm happy now. My day job is working with marriages in trouble. So every day, we get to deal with people who are in tremendous pain, typically because of the consequences either of their own behavior or the behavior of their spouse. And as I watch that, I realize that there are many people who will make decisions based on the moment. This makes me happy right now, therefore it must be right, because if it makes me happy, no matter what it does to anybody else, it's the right thing to do. Typically, over time, they come to a different conclusion. That it made me happy at the moment, I thought it was the best thing for me to do, but look what it's done. Look at the consequences. In our workshop we do for Marriages in Trouble, we talk about a concept of a book written by a lady by the name of Welch. The name of the book is 10-10-10. I just liked the title. I read about it, and I didn't need to buy the book. I had everything I needed. Basically, she says, every time you make a decision in life, you should think about, how am I going to feel about this in 10 days, 10 months, and 10 years? Just think about that. Oh, Anybody else ever been on a diet besides me? And you think, well, if I eat that Krispy Kreme right now, I know how I'm going to feel in 10 minutes. But how am I going to feel in 10 days? How am I going to feel in 10 months? How am I going to feel in 10 years? Well, think about people who say, I want to go my own route, do my own thing. How are they going to feel about that? As you progress through the tens, like, okay, 10 days from now, I might still feel like I was justified or I should have done that. 10 months from now, I might be looking at it a little bit differently. 10 years from now, I may rue the day I ever made that decision and followed that course. For example, you may have read the quote, I think it was, a year ago, maybe 2 now. One of the fellows who lives in this area, his name is Billy Ray Cyrus. Did you happen to read the quote where he said, ABC, talking about the network, ABC destroyed my family? Anybody read that? Anybody watch his daughter on television lately? I flip as fast as I can. Well, I'm a guy, I do that anyway, but when she comes on, I change channels as rapidly as I can because I look at that and go, there's that little girl that used to sing at church. And look at her now. Is she doing what makes her happy? Apparently. Oh, and there's a second thing about that. People who feel like they can do what makes them happy right now, no matter what, they'll also have many other people who will tell them that that's exactly what they should do. If you want to do something bad, if you want to do something wrong, if you want to violate your beliefs and morals, there will always be people who will help you justify it. There'll be people who will help you get drunk. There'll be people who will help you commit adultery. There are people who will help you steal. There are people who will help you do all those things. The old verse in the King James used to say it this way, evil companionship corrupts good morals. Basically what it means is that there are people who will help you do bad stuff and cheer you on. But guess where they are when you finally face the consequence of your behavior? Those are not the people who rescue you. Those are not the people who support you. They abandon you once they have used you and taken from you everything they can get. And so, I'm not a prophet nor a son of a prophet, Amos 7:14, but I predict there will come a day when that young lady will look back and regret, as have many, many others. So when I talk about guilt, I'm not talking about everybody in the world, because there are people who lose things. Oh, and sometimes it's always everybody's fault but theirs. Have you met those people? It's like the little girl who said, Dad, Johnny made me break the vase. How did he make you do that? Well, when I swung at him, he ducked. He made me break the vase. We live in a world like that where people want to litigate and blame everybody else, and it's not my fault, it's his fault, it's her fault, it's my father's fault, it's my mother's fault, it's my wife's fault, it's my kid's fault, it's everybody's fault. Somewhere along the line, if we're to have integrity and live a life worth living, we admit to ourselves, I am far from perfect. I am flawed. And when I do those things that are wrong, here's the way you deal with it. You allow yourself to feel guilt for your transgression. You say guilt to the level this guy did. You only feel guilt to that level if you go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into the wrongdoing before you finally face it. I mean, if he'd faced it here, his guilt would have been much less, and he would have dealt with it and handled it a much easier way. But if you continue to do the bad stuff and do the bad stuff, you just build up more and more and more and more consequences. And not only will the consequences out there that come back to you be bad, but when you finally have to confront yourself, when you finally look at the person in the mirror without those shades, when you finally see reality, it's when you think to yourself, how in the world did I do that? And it can eat you alive. And what will your enemies do? Did you read in the text here what he said his enemies did? Oh, let's first he started with his friends. Let's see if I can find that passage very quickly about his friends. Verse 11, gentlemen, if you want to put that up there. He says, my friends and companions avoid me because of my wounds. My neighbors stay far away. There's two dimensions of that, by the way. That statement, based on my experience in life with me and with the other people with whom I work, that actually has two dimensions. The first is true and the second is not. You say, what do you mean? Are there people who really will avoid you because of your wounds? Are there really people who had been your friends who will just disappear? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. They will. Not everybody, you understand. Some do it because they can't admit to themselves that anybody they would love could be so flawed. They decide you are not who they ever thought you were. They write you off as some kind of a bad person and they just get away. But I'm not sure I would call those people friends to begin with. Oh, we say it in our culture this way: fair weather friends. They're there when things are good. But then there are also friends and companions who will avoid you not because of the fact that they've written you off, but they'll avoid you because of the fact that they don't have a clue what to do to help. And because they feel so helpless, they'll avoid you. Like many years ago, I left my wife. I divorced her. For 3 years, we were divorced. After 3 years, by the grace of God, she remarried me. I had all the penitence that David would talk about here for all the things I did over the years, including a young man by the name of John Hazlip, have come to me and said, I am so sorry I abandoned you, but I didn't know what to do, so I did nothing. Now, the reason I can say that about John is because you know what a loving man he is. If a man like John could avoid you because I don't know what to do, then other good people could as well. Do you understand my point? There's a second dimension of that, and that's this. Sometimes they're not really avoiding us. We just think they are, when in actuality we're avoiding them. There are people who are trying to help, but because of our own sinfulness, or our own guilt over our sin, either one, we sometimes avoid them. We stay away from them when they're really doing what they can to help us. There's a guy right now I've been texting and phone calling for a year. He hasn't changed his number yet because he's a businessman and too many people have it. He never responds to my text. He never responds to my phone calls. I will continue until one of us dies. Your friends don't always avoid you. Sometimes you just choose to think so. But look at the next verse. There are these people who seek your life. They set their traps. They harm you. There are people who rejoice when you do wrong. Anybody ever discover that? Has anybody here ever discovered there are actually some people on the planet who don't like you? There are. Let me see. I got to scan this other verse very quickly here. He actually said, let's look much further down. Look in verse 19, gentlemen. In verse 19, he says, many are those who are my vigorous enemies. Those who hate me without reason are numerous. That's actually two groups of people there. There are some people who despise you, and now that you've done something wrong, they have their gossip. They have their ammunition. They can tell people, see, I was always right about him, or see, I knew about her. It's just proven by what he did or what she did, and these are your biggest enemies who just delight in the fact that you finally fall. And then there's people who hate you without reason. I actually put it on Facebook once a couple of years ago, and all of a sudden it just went all over the place. People quoted it like crazy. I wish I could remember exactly how I said it so I could sound brilliant. But it was something to this effect, which said, some people hate me with good reason because I've done some very stupid things in my life. But I figure most of the people that don't like me because somebody told them not to. What about it? Do you think that's the case? He mentions both kinds of people here. So how did he deal with his enemies? We're going to skip back up. I'm out of time. We're going to skip back up to verse, I think that's a 13, gentlemen, but without my glasses, it could be an ant. All right, verse 13. He says, I'm a deaf man who cannot hear, like a mute who cannot open his mouth. Next verse, he says, I've become like a man who does not hear, whose mouth cannot offer no reply. When I first was reading the psalm, again, I thought, wait a minute, what does he mean? And then I understood because the next verses explained it. He say, I wait for you, O Lord. You will answer, O Lord my God. You know what he just said? When those people are attacking me, when those people are gossiping about me, when people are telling those rumors about me, it is to my advantage to shut up. Let God speak for me. Anybody discovered the truth of that? Many years ago, I told my friend Jack Exum, I said, everybody's talking about me. Exum said, what an ego. Most people don't even know who you are. Actually, that helped me quite a bit. I got to thinking, that's probably a good thing that not everybody knows who I am, and many people don't know who I am. But when people are attacking and saying bad things to you, and you jump up and rail back at them, it doesn't shut them up. It supports their belief that you're evil. And so you say, what do? I will let God defend me. Why? Because God sees in my heart. God sees not only the things that I have done that are wrong, but God sees what's really in there. And even though I am flawed, God sees the part of me that loves him. God sees the part of me that loves others. A friend of mine, a Grammy winner, friend of mine in the gospel music world, was showing me a song a few years ago. I don't remember the song. It may have become popular. I don't know. You may know it. I just remember reading the lyrics. He said, I want you to read this one line. And one line of that song said, others see what I have done. The Father sees me through the Son. I thought, that's a great line. I can't defend myself. I cannot. And if you've ever done anything wrong, and if other people know about it, they may bring it up 20 or 30 years later. Not long ago, I saw on Facebook a guy posted, most of the things I have done wrong in my life since I was a teenager, I have justified in my mind because of what my minister did when I was a teenager. His name was Joe Bain. You think that still hurts? You think you want to write on Facebook, I repented 30 years ago. God forgave me 30 years ago. You think it makes a difference? You let God speak for you. Will God speak to that guy? Only if that guy's willing to listen to God. But God will speak by using you. Taking flawed people that he has forgiven the guilt of, made them whole again, and will use them where he chooses to use them. And by that, God speaks loudly. I have forgiven the guilt of the sin. Look what I do. And so, find the verse about confession. We'll end this up. I apologize for being 5 minutes over. Go on and they'll find it in just a second. Basically at the end, what he says, and by the way, you'll find this repeated in the penitent Psalms, all 6 of them. Basically, the concept is, when I confessed, God forgave. Now, let me give you 2 dimensions of that, and I'll quit. One is to God. The forgiveness you feel from God is when you confess to him. But sometimes we need other people. There you go. I confess my iniquity. I'm troubled by my sin. The next verse. Well, it's not exactly what I'm looking for, but basically he's talking about that it's God that forgives. Okay, so God forgives. I don't have to have anyone to forgive me to be forgiven by God. God can forgive me if nobody else does. Do you understand that? But, there is this unbelievable value when it comes to being able to tell Christian people, I confess my sin, and they forgive you too. Particularly when they say so. So I'll end with this story and apologize for being over time. After Alice and I had remarried, we'd been married 2 or 3 years in the second marriage. Things were going very well. I got a phone call one day from a fellow by the name of Ed Welch. Ed Welch just died 2 years ago last month. Ed Welch was the man who had fired me back when I had gotten into my sin back in 1984. He called and said, Joseph, he was a Southern gentleman, you understand. Yes, sir. He said, about time you came back down here and told this church how sorry you are for what you did. I said, I can't do that. He said, yes, you will, October 10th. Click. So I went home and told Alice, and she said, I think we should. And so I called him back and said, okay, I'm coming. I'll do it, but I go first. I'm going before the announcements. I'm going before God comes, okay? So I got up and told the church how sorry I was for what I had done and hurt them all those years before. And then many people indicated their love and kindness and compassion toward Alice and me. And as we drove away, Alice said, "Do you feel as empty as I do?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And she said, What is it that didn't happen that we needed to happen?" And we talked about it for a while, and finally we figured it out. They indicated it, but nobody said what we needed to hear. Nobody looked me in the eye and said, "I forgive you." Would you like for people to tell you that? Well, they can't until you admit that you're a sinner. I've done this. And then godly people, even though God already has forgiven you, will help your heart by looking you in the eye and say, "I forgive you." And there's healing in that. If you need that today, you can tell the whole church, and many people can tell you. If you want to tell just a handful of people, I will sing this next song. There'll be some folks around the walls if you want to go back and just talk to them. But there's power in healing when you confess. If you need to, let's do it when we stand and sing this song.
Sweetly, Lord, have we heard